Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowry.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowry. I'm a teacher. I'm an exercise physiologist and sports nutritionist, and once upon a time I was a competitive bodybuilder.
Yeah, this is Phil Stevens, powerlifter, strength coach at Strength Guild, and formerly 293 pounds like 4 weeks ago. Now I'm 263.
Oh, my God.
Damn, dude.
Disappearing.
263 this morning.
Unreal.
Wow. This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson. I'm exercise physiologist, do a whole bunch of other stuff. I was in Baja, Mexico last week, so I wasn't on due to El Internet. No bueno, but I'm back on. And I'm in Vancouver doing a talk for 2 days here on intermittent fasting, ketones, and carbohydrates. So it's going to be fun.
Hot topic, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when you guys, when we start, I'm always the straight man. You know, I always say, like, I'm a teacher, I'm a nutritionist. You guys always sprinkle in something funny. I'll be boring.
I got to keep it entertaining.
That's right.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. Phil's, you know, like the body weight yo-yo, you're God knows where, hacking your way through the jungle like Indiana Jones, and
Yep.
I don't know. Okay. All right. We are going to start with news and mail, everyone, and then our topic of the day is essentially going to be, what have you eaten or supplemented this past week? I think the idea is to give some insight because the three of us are all, doing very different things, but how are we doing it? And then also that listeners can maybe think about themselves, what have you purposely eaten or supplemented this week and why? So almost just sort of a spot check, on what you're doing. So let's start with some mail. Let's do this first one from Emma. This mail actually becomes news often these days because we've got a couple of, clever listeners, and they're like, look at this study.
Strength and muscle sport news.
Emma sent one on muscle memory. This is EurekaAlert.org released this. It's about a new study. So it says muscle memory discovery ends the use it or lose it dogma. Now, I think this is a little exaggerative, but it's interesting. New research shows that extra nuclei gained during exercise persist even after a muscle shrinks from disuse or disease or aging, and can be mobilized rapidly to facilitate bigger gains upon retraining. It's just neat that it brings up this muscle memory idea, which, often floats around gym discussions. According to a review published in Frontiers in Physiology, modern lab techniques allow us to see that nuclei gained during training persist even when the muscles shrink, atrophy due to disuse, etc. These residual myonuclei allow more and faster growth when the muscles are retrained, suggesting we can quote-unquote bank muscle growth. So you can see where I'm going with this, and you guys already realize there's truth to this, of course, but whether or not it ends the use it or lose it, that's the reversibility principle. I don't think that's going away anytime soon completely. Anyway, says Lawrence Schwartz, professor of biology at the University of Massachusetts, by far our biggest cells are our myocytes, our muscles. Muscle growth is accompanied by the addition of new nuclei from stem cells to help meet the enhanced synthetic demands of these large muscle cells, explains Schwartz. This led to the assumption that a given nucleus controls a defined volume of cytoplasm. And I'm actually on board with that. I mean, if you think about the standard textbook cell, the nucleus is in the middle, and it's going to be able to control a certain amount of cell volume, the synthetic machinery and whatnot. Let's see. Some researchers have reported the presence of disintegrating nuclei in muscle tissue during atrophy or inactivity, injury, or paralysis. But modern cell-type specific dyes and genetic markers have shown that dying nuclei, taking a closer look, they're able to detect that those disintegrating nuclei were in fact from inflammatory or other cells recruited into the atrophied muscle. So, in other words, kind of adjusting this idea that any, degrading nuclei that have been donated to those big muscles for larger operations, probably it's not the degrading muscle nuclei itself, it's from other cells. So the quote here is, they want to modify this, I think, a little bit, but use it or lose it until you use it again. So that's kind of what they're kind of saying here with the muscle memory. It says the discovery that myonuclei are retained indefinitely emphasizes the importance of exercise in early life. During adolescence, muscle growth is enhanced by hormones, nutrition, and a robust pool of stem cells, making it an ideal period for individuals to, quote-unquote, bank myonuclei that can be drawn upon later in old age. In other words, to, get swole again. And then they go on to say that mice given testosterone acquire new nuclei that do persist long after the steroid use ends. So they're just talking about the idea of training when you're young and also how drugs do this. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past. Phil, let me ask you just quickly about this. How old were you when you started, seriously training? Do you remember?
Oh, I was too old. I wish I had started earlier. 20.
Okay. Yep.
So I'd messed around a little bit before then, but that's when I'd say I started getting a lot more serious about it.
Yeah. To be fair, when I say I started when I was 13, we're talking about benching plastic and cement weights off my floor.
Yeah.
But still, I guess there's some of that stimulus there, and this really fits with my general philosophy too, right? The younger. And I'm sure when you work with younger kids, Phil, you're thinking, I can build a base this kid can use for the rest of her or his life, as far as the muscle mass and stuff. Any thoughts on this, Miguel?
Yeah, the two thoughts I have are exactly what you guys said about especially kids. And it's so hard, and I'm sure we've all done this and coached people where you're like, man, I'm trying to tell you all the stuff that I did wrong so you don't make the same mistakes I did. And everyone just seems to be sort of predisposed to kind of make their own mistakes. I don't know if you can ever kind of get them out of that. Mm-hmm. So now I'm just like, okay, make your mistakes, but just don't injure yourself, right? Learn what you need to learn, but, try to do it a faster way than, what I did, which was horribly wrong road. And then also about drug testing in sport. If, someone is now, quote unquote natural or whatever word you want to use associated with that, not using any exogenous drugs, but they did in the past for 5 years, maybe that's even 10 years ago. In the past we might have said, well, that's out of their system, it's no big deal. And now knowing this, you're like, wow, did they still have a big advantage because of, the changes that they've made to the architecture that basically gets sort of reignited once they start lifting again.
Yep.
So it makes that all super messy.
Yeah. I think we can all agree. To break new ground on muscle mass takes heroic effort. But to maintain or reclaim, that's quite a bit easier, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I've had plenty of guys that were like, yeah, I used to lift through my 20s and early 30s, and then they haven't now. Now they're 40, and, they take off fast.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that. Sometimes I'll come back after summer vacation, and people are like, Dr. Lowry, you look much bigger. I'm like, I started lifting again. I don't know what to say. I got to eat and lift again, And I think because I kind of, like you said, built that underlying infrastructure when I was young,
Look at me, and I took a 2.5 year break, kind of, and it didn't take long to get close to back where I was. I'm talking after a couple major surgeries. It was all still there. It's just I was kind of just going in the gym and doing this or that, and then it was okay. I'm going to compete again, and it came back pretty quick.
Yeah,
yeah. So
I think that actually Fortress used to talk about how it's not just muscle mass too. You seem to put in place a variety of systems, that you can then recall upon.
Oh yeah, even mental fortitude and
soft tissue, nervous system, a lot of this stuff. I think
Yeah, especially in your case, Phil. I wonder how much, and you had something different because you had surgeries and different changing of vectors of loading. Yeah. How much of the soft tissue and fascia that takes a lot longer to turn over both the pro and a con, that may have stayed around and, helped you to support heavier loads faster.
Oh, yeah.
Than you've never done it, too.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, looking back now, I probably needed a 2.5-year break.
Yeah.
So it probably helped me. So with the rest of my body. So,
some downtime. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and you know what, too? I liked how that article that Emma sent was about also not just disuse, but injury, like what we're saying with Phil, right? I mean, coming back from those injuries, also sort of a scenario to consider with the muscle memory. So, this next one was pretty complicated. This is Natalia. She says, "My name is Natalia. I was studying for one of my nutrition classes and read your article, Dietary Fats and Sports Nutrition, to further understand how dietary fats are broken down in our organism," she says, "in order to provide the necessary energy when glycogen depletion occurs." So I'm trying to remember. I think this is an article I wrote for the NSCA sports nutrition book. Anyway, I was a little confused if plasma free fatty acids or muscle triglyceride storage or both would exhibit increased use if exercise continues after glycogen depletion. This is a topic of study in my exam review, and this is the only one that really confused me. I thought both might be increased, in other words, drawing on blood fats, right, fatty acids, and what's stored in the muscle when you're glycogen depleted. I was hoping you could help me figure this out. I'm studying for this exam. Thank you, Natalia. So this is what I replied, and then Mike, you're really interested in fuel selector switches and metabolic flexibility and everything. So I said, are you an IronRadio listener? Because this sounds like something one of our, nerdier listeners might say, but she's not. She's just a student. But it says, I said, either way, it depends on a few things. If you go back to some of the older papers in the 70s through the 90s, intramuscular triglyceride breakdown, or hydrolysis, and free fatty acid oxidation, they depend on a few things. One, obviously, your fitness level, right? Because trained aerobic athletes are going to be better at using intramuscular triglycerides, and that's going to make them less reliant on the blood-borne fatty acids. Muscle fiber type, and that's kind of linked to training status, but type 1 fibers have more metabolic machinery to use intramuscular fat. Initial fatty acid concentrations in the blood play a role, right, of how much fatty acids you draw from the blood. Depends on what's there to begin with, and that sort of thing. I attached 2 studies about glycogen depletion and the proportions of intramuscular fat droplets versus blood-derived fat oxidation. So I said the short answer is that both intramuscular and serum-derived fat oxidation would probably increase in a low glycogen state. But honestly, I'd have to read up on work by guys like Asker Jukendrup, the guys who love to delve into this stuff, or even talk to you, Mike. But I said, to me, the distinction isn't critical from a body composition perspective. I mean, whether it's drawn from your blood or burned from those, oil droplets essentially within muscle, because when you think about the whole body economy, of energy balance and fat status, either way, there's going to be a reduction in body fatness. Again, if you think from a body composition standpoint, because of overall, energy balance or fat balance and economy. Mike, what do you think on this? I mean, do you think it really matters where you draw the fats from, or training in if you're on a low carb diet and you use up your muscle glycogen? What's your thought about where the fat burning comes from, and does it matter?
Yeah, there's a couple things on that. So one of the things is that if you just do a overnight fast, you actually deplete liver glycogen, but you don't really touch muscle glycogen at all.
Yep.
If you can fast for 48, 72 hours, unless you're doing a lot of muscular work, muscle glycogen doesn't really even go down. So if you try to do muscle glycogen depletion specifically, if anyone's done that, it's horrendously horrible, and it's not fun. It's a lot of muscular work. And then on top of it, usually on most of the studies, like the sleep low, train high, and the different ones, like Marquette's done that, Louise Burke has done some. They usually come back the next day, maybe they give them a little protein, and then they just beat the snot out of them again. So to get to that point is very brutal. So you probably have some immune system, a bunch of other stuff going on. In terms of where it comes from, I would agree with you, and the caveat being I don't know if we entirely know for sure. Because trying to do those studies, tracer studies and things like that are really hard.
Yeah.
Initially, they said, intramuscular triglycerides aren't used much. And they took snapshots from people who were not athletes and said, oh my gosh, look at this. There's, fat droplets in the muscle. Insulin is all screwed up. Oh, it's a horrible idea. And they take the same snapshot from an athlete, and they're like, yeah, this athlete's going to be screwed up. Look at all those intramuscular triglycerides. And they're like, oh, wait, they're not. They're fine.
It's a good thing in them, right?
Yeah, and so then they realize that it's the turnover and how much you're basically running fuel through that system that probably matters the most. There's been some other arguments that because it's next to the muscle, that the use of local fat is probably faster and easier. That's been kind of debated also. So I don't know if we really know. For body composition, probably doesn't matter that much.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue there's probably easier ways to get to that. But I have used it in some athletes where we're really trying to upregulate the use of fat. And we're specifically trying to, when we replete them with carbohydrates, we're trying to get enhanced carbohydrate use from upregulation of CS and other enzymes and things like that. But even those studies, you only want to do something like that in a highly advanced athlete in the off season. And the studies right now are still even split how much of that is even beneficial.
Yeah.
So it's a good question, and I think hopefully we'll have more info in the future. But for now, I would tend to agree with you on that.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I just think from a practical viewpoint, body comp, even performance, I'm not sure it's going to be it matters that much. It's just not going to be that dramatic. No.
More of an academic thing.
Yeah.
From a mechanistic point of view, yeah.
I brought it up because I think it might be worthwhile for listeners to realize that you don't just store fat in your adipose tissue like in your love handles, but you have a couple 100 grams of these oil droplets in muscle tissue, and it can be confusing. Like you said, diabetics have too much intramuscular triglyceride droplets, but then so do high-end aerobic athletes. So for very different reasons. Yeah, it's interesting.
And that's the one thing I do have some reservations about. Like a ketogenic diet on someone who may not be super healthy. Because even in people who are healthy, that does appear to change the insulin sensitivity of the muscle at that level, what's called the non-pathological muscle insulin resistance. Because carbohydrates are so low in the system, the muscle doesn't want to take them up, so it can spare more of them for the brain. That doesn't appear to be a negative thing in terms of health that we know of, but on the flip side, if you just inject a whole bunch of fat and you overload the muscle with a bunch of fat, you get buildup of ceramides, lipotoxicity, and you screw with the local insulin sensitivity again, too. Mm-hmm. So you're always kind of walking this sort of fine balancing act.
Right, yeah. Okay. Let me get to one more before we go to break. And I really want to hear Phil's rubber hits the road take on this, but... This is a new study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, so arguably the highest impact, high-end nutrition journal from Jeremy Cross, C-R-O-S, and colleagues. Impact of sleep restriction on metabolic outcomes induced by overfeeding, a randomized control trial in healthy individuals. So this is brand new stuff from this year. It says overconsumption of energy-dense foods and sleep restriction are both associated with the development of metabolic and cardiovascular diseases, but their combined effects remain poorly evaluated. Now, right off the bat, I'm thinking, they're just thinking general health and heart disease, but I'm thinking, what about overeating powerlifters or bulking bodybuilders who aren't getting enough sleep? Is it going to somehow screw something up, right? So I'm kind of twisting this to our ends. The objective of this study was to assess whether sleep restriction potentiates the effects of short-term overfeeding on basically fatty liver, intrahepatocellular lipid, they say. So basically fatty liver and glucose metabolism. They took 10 healthy subjects. They exposed them to 6 days of overfeeding. They were eating 130% of their needs, so 30% above normal. And they were taking the extra calories as sugars and fats. And they actually had them sleep normally for 8 hours, or sleep restricted, where they only let them sleep 4 hours. Anyway, the results, overfeeding significantly increased liver fat, right, fatty liver, And during an oral glucose tolerance test, right, so they challenged them with some carbs, and overfeeding significantly increased their hepatic glucose production. So again, it's just sort of suggesting a little bit of resistance here, poorer carbohydrate metabolism, if you will. And then this is interesting. Compared with overfeeding alone, overfeeding plus sleep restriction did not change fatty liver, did not change the fat droplets in the liver cells. It did not change endogenous glucose production. It says sleep restriction did not significantly alter blood pressure, heart rate, or plasma cortisol, right, the stress hormone. So they conclude that 6 days of a higher calorie diet, with the extra calories from sucrose and fat, it did significantly increase fatty liver and glucose production, suggesting hepatic insulin resistance. But the effects of overfeeding were not altered by sleep restriction. So that's what I wanted to ask you, Phil. If we turn this toward our own ends, right, do you find that, you get up early and all that kind of stuff. If you're undersleeping, are you still going to plow through the grub and try to gain weight and not change your diet strategy? Because this suggests that it kind of doesn't matter if you...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because the only reason I'm doing it is for a goal. So, I'm doing it for a meet. So, and I'll be honest with you, it has nothing to do with health.
Yeah.
Like, I felt like at the meet, I felt like I was about 4 weeks away from bypass surgery. That's just the truth. And that's why I don't do this a year round, because I know I can't. Like right now, I've dropped 30 pounds. And I'm going to stay down this way till about next August, and then I'll start eating my way up. So I spend a significant portion of the year not doing that because I know it's better for me.
Right, yeah.
But, if I got to get up and got to get my work done, I got to eat because I got to meet on this day at this time. So there's no break.
How many hours of sleep do you think you get on average? Do you get 7 or 8 or no?
No, I won't get 7 or 8. I get 2 wonderful days a week where I get to sleep in. And then my average is probably 6.5. So on like Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
And then because I got to be up at 4:30, but I don't get out of the gym till 7:45 at night. So I still got to go home, eat, mess with the kids, blah blah blah. So
it's interesting to me that they took healthy guys and basically induced a certain state that looks like prediabetes almost. I'm
sure my lipids were all messed up, man.
Yeah, yeah. It was only 6 days, and I think that's something you got to consider as well. This is pretty short term.
6 days and 13 weeks. So of eating up.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think normally when you see fatty liver and that kind of stuff, it's in sedentary people who eat, crappy diets, and they have metabolic syndrome, kind of thing. Yeah. And it's just an interesting twist on it, right? When, does overeating for you, and let's pretend that you're young, is that going to be dramatically different because of the other ways that you live, even than these healthy guys that they just overfed?
I would think. I have no evidence at all, but I have to think, me going in, squatting and pulling 700 pounds routinely, and all the work it takes to get up to that and do that has to have some kind of benefit over the average person, even the average healthy individual. I would think. But at the same time, I'm still not stupid enough I will never tell anybody it's good for me. I'm doing this for my health.
You can feel it. Yeah.
Especially I can feel it more now than like 15 years ago. I'd be like, I'll just eat like this year round. But not anymore. Not anymore. I just can't do it.
Mike, any thoughts about overfeeding, 30% above needs and fatty liver, and whether or not sleep's going to affect a bulking phase?
Yeah, I was a little surprised in the study. I probably expected there to be more worse effects, but the more I try to look at insulin and glucose regulation and all that kind of stuff, the more I'm like, I don't even know if I know anything anymore. I just think it's way more complicated than what I was taught, for sure. And it appears like the liver, I think of the liver when I teach as just think of it as kind of a massive buffer, right? The liver can luckily take a lot of abuse if you do something crazy like this study, you're probably going to see changes in the liver first. But over time, if those stay persistent, then you start seeing more, whole body changes. So there's some other work that I looked at years ago thinking that, well, maybe we could change like insulin resistance and make fat cells more resistant to insulin, right? And try to prevent the body from shoving fat into fat droplets. I finally found a knockout mouse study where they did that. But then what happened was all the fats backed up into the liver and into the bloodstream, and they were just a metabolic wreck.
Yeah.
Right? So there's kind of no physiologic free lunch. It's just, what does the study look at, and what are the changes? And like you guys said, this is a very short-term study for a week. What would happen? You have clients and people, myself in the past, who are chronically sleep deprived for years. Doing this, and that's a very different time scale too.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this also ignores our body's amazing ability to adapt.
Oh, totally.
Like if somebody trains for 6 days, they're not going to see a lot of change.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, couldn't it be a case of 6 days of your liver getting bombarded like this? It's like, oh, okay, well, it's 6 days. Over time, I mean, one would expect like your metabolism is going to ramp up over time. When I start eating, I'll gain weight right away, and then all of a sudden my metabolism catches on fire.
Mm-hmm.
One would think the liver would be like, oh, crap, this guy's doing this all the time. We need to up our production of,
Yeah.
We need to work harder. Get this stuff out of here.
Mm-hmm.
But
it is amazing to me how, on both sides of the spectrum, I'm constantly just amazed at how resilient the body is, and if you're an elite athlete, how some of the small things matter just because the performance changes are so small. But on the other end of the spectrum, the fact that, someone whose, butt's been welded to the couch could eat, 7-Eleven Slurpee with no ice, and their body can even process that and they don't go into a diabetic coma.
Yeah.
That's just fascinating.
Me too. Me too, man. Yep, I agree. Like, how does that not kill you? Like, there's nothing in nature where you can stumble into like 200 grams of sucrose, or almost nothing.
And you're massively insulin resistant, all the bad stuff, but yet, hey, you still make it for years. So that's just fascinating.
To Phil's point about adaptation and whatnot, and about being, comparing a lifter to somebody who's just quote unquote healthy. I mean, if we accept that muscle tissue is the primary healthy recipient of blood glucose, right? You simply have more muscle mass to deposit the carbohydrates in, and that's going to change the intra-organ, dynamics and all that too, so just larger mammal.
Yeah, you have I explain it to students as the more muscle you have, you just have this massive sink of which to dispose more glucose. So not only are you burning more calories overall because you're just a larger mammal, but you actually have an area. It's like opening the drain on your bathtub to get more water out. If you have a bigger drain, you're able to get rid of more of that faster.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what the guest that was on a couple weeks ago said, a large increase in muscle mass had very little to do with resting metabolic rate. But, how much are we actually totally resting? When I'm just walking at 293 pounds, I'm using a lot more than the 180-pound guy.
Yeah, all day long.
It's a lot of effort. That's what I notice when I'm up. It's like, whew, here comes a flight of stairs. Let's go.
Brace yourself.
And you get up and your legs are on fire, and I'm using all this stuff. So
right, and I think a lot of our listeners, I think this is something that was immediately apparent to me, but when you think about it, like you're saying, the physics of it is real. It is one of the corrective preventers of weight gain is that when you carry around 20, 30, 40 more pounds all day long, you burn more calories all day long. So now you've got to eat even more to compensate for the additional calorie expenditure, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Assuming you're just as active, because some people I think who are not lifters gain a lot of weight, their activity doesn't keep going up, right? So they're not really having to move more of that around just because they're not moving as much. So
yeah, well, I think that kind of comes back to, when we say you've got to learn to be lazy on some level when you're trying to gain enormous amounts of weight, like for lifting purposes and whatnot. You can't run around like a chicken with your head cut off. Yeah. Because the bigger you get, Jesus, your calorie output would just be huge. So you got to try to take some downtime.
Yeah.
So. All right.
Can we touch on one more thing before break?
Yeah.
It's something that numerous listeners have asked us to put our 2 cents in on. USAPL last week came out and they had to make a decision on the trans athlete thing. And they decided their position is just you cannot compete. So they were very scientific in their answers of why, though. I mean, so basically through analysis, the impact of maturation in the presence of naturally occurring androgen levels necessary for male development, significant advantages are had, including but not limited to body and muscle mass, bone density, bone structure, and connective tissue. These advantages are not eliminated by reduction of serum androgens such as testosterone, yielding potential advantage in strength sports such as powerlifting. So basically they went against the International Olympic Committee because they feel that you do have an advantage for the male to female. Mm-hmm. And everybody's up in arms over this.
Really?
Oh, God. There's in the powerlifting community, there's both sides are just yelling at each other.
Oh.
And what I see is a lot of emotional stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My take is it's a sport. It's not life. The USA Powerlifting is an organization that has the right to choose. Just like the NCAA. If you take too much caffeine, you're banned.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So why... I mean, and I deal with trans athletes from both sides. I have family members that are. And I can tell you, my stance that I talk to people is like I have one client that is a female to male. And he will never, just from what I've seen, he's not going to match the men on the platform, despite his now increased androgen levels. And if all that differentiated us was androgens or just hormones, why isn't somebody like who's blatantly on, talks about it, like let's say Laura Phelps, West Side lifter. She is on massive amounts of stuff. I can't tell you exact milligrams, but it's very obvious.
Yeah.
She will never match pound for pound a man. It doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. You know, of course, she beats all the women, but let's say she's 181. She's not matching men that are on the same levels of androgen use that she is. There's got to be something more planned there, and I thought their answer was pretty spot on and scientific in general. When you remove emotions from this, you know, and I think that's the issue is a lot of people come out with their emotions like, oh yeah, let them do it. Yeah, but come on,
right?
Right. I mean, this girl has been living her life for 23 years as a man, and now she's a woman, and we're supposed to let her come and compete against my women at a USAPL is a non-drugged organization, like none allowed for anybody. There's other federations out there, you know, is my take. It's like, if that's nobody's banning you from the sport. You're banned from this specific organization. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, that's my take. What do you guys say from a scientific point of view?
I mean, I would say from a scientific point of view, not ethics or anything else in there. I mean, I would tend to agree with the USAPL, because if you fast forward and let's say they are allowed, right, and especially an organization that is drug tested, that is their thing. Oh, what if they all start winning? And then you're like, oh, it's because of, you know, enhanced androgens and things like that. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know. I think that's a worse place to be in. And like you said, you're not discriminating people for their choice or anything like that. You're just saying, hey, for this organization, here are our rules. And if you want to play with our organization, then that's kind of the deal. So,
I mean, for God's sakes, exactly. That's what I'm. Well, I mean, in powerlifting, you don't get to deadlift unless you're wearing the right socks.
Right.
You know, it's a rule. That's all. You know?
USAPL means by wearing the wrong underwear.
Yes, exactly.
I'm like, are you kidding?
One of my lifters can't wear a Strength Guild shirt with a Strength Guild logo on it because I don't pay them money. It's you know, it's a sport. It's not life. Is what I get at. It's not life. They have the right, and if you don't like it, don't support them. You know?
Yeah, you know, you guys, I mean, there's a whole field of the sociology of sport and how it doesn't pan out to regular life. I mean, think about a hockey game that would equal assault charges out on the street, right?
Oh, yeah.
You can't just assault
totally.
someone. And yet, if it's part of a game, it's looked at a little differently. I'm not saying it's okay to, but everything is biopsychosocial, I remind myself. And I side on the bio with this. Like, I think like you guys and the organization, right? Like, this harkens back to Emma's email, I think, about increased myonuclei, through an entire youth of being one gender or another and muscle memory. And so I appreciate the psychosocial aspects of this and some of the social justice issues of this, but I don't think you could ignore the biology. If the machine has been conditioned and grown over years to be one way, and now you're like you said, it's not as simple. Just like in that study, that muscle memory study, yes, testosterone can increase myonuclei, but there are other things at work here. It doesn't act alone. You can't say, here's a shot of testosterone, you're a dude. When it comes to biology, like, the underlying biology that's been developed for years and years.
And that's exactly. So I figured I've had like 6 people reach out. Like, what's your take? Are you guys doing that on the show this week? And so, it's a tough issue. And like you said, you probably get some hate mail. But, I mean, you can't ignore science. And there's lots of science on it, that weren't. And that's not saying men are better than women. We're different, and that's okay. It's okay. And I think what women are doing in powerlifting right now is freaking amazing, and they're doing more than ever.
Yeah.
But it's a tough issue, but
it is. I think almost we'd have to bring in a sports sociologist, or a sports psychologist or something like that, or some social justice person. I actually know a couple, and say, what's your thought on this? Because I mean, we're pretty open. My bias, to use a phrase from Dr. Nelson, my bias is usually biological. And that's where I'm coming from with this. Yeah. I'm not saying I don't know. It's like the issue of having gender neutral bathrooms and that kind of stuff. It's just an incendiary topic, and it's just tough. It's so multifaceted.
Well, and in my opinion, in rules for sports, you have to approach it from that view. You can't approach it from an emotional point of view. I don't like fighting, so it shouldn't be allowed in hockey. No, it's part of the game.
Don't go to a UFC match then.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, right, yeah. No, right.
Oh, that's what. Yeah. So
good one.
I mean, it's you have to remove your emotions from this and look at the facts.
Right. Well, the reason
we are different.
I think, like, when I bring up gender neutral bathrooms and stuff, because that's a big controversy on my campus right now, because you're thinking about all of the infrastructure and investment to do this sort of thing. But I mean, I'm not sure how to best deal with this issue. Do you have a third category that's for? Because you'd almost have to think it's almost directional from male to female, right? Versus female to male, and do you have divisions or flights of those people? It's sort of an administrative challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, in powerlifting, the tough part about that, let's say you do just add another division, you'll have to add 2 new divisions.
Right.
And they'll be like, at most meets, you might have one signed up, maybe. So now you got a meet director that's having to have a whole other division.
For 1 or 2 people.
It's tough.
Yeah,
maybe, hopefully.
Right, hopefully, right. Otherwise,
most meets none.
Right.
So,
you bought the trophies and everything, and then it's almost like women's bodybuilding was. Like, there's no competitors.
Yeah.
This time, it's like I said. I think it's an administrative challenge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa! Wow. Well,
I can't blame them for where they went, but I mean, it's their choice. And they're either gonna get a bad PR over it or good PR, but regardless, it's their choice. So they are an independent organization that has the right to do that. So
I mean, the rules set. The rules have to be reductionist in some way, right? A sport is a microcosm, kind of what you're saying, of life. It has to be reduced down to we have to come up with rules that you operate within, in order to have a sport at all. And it throws.
I mean, it emotionally pains me to wear long socks. I need crew socks. So you guys need to change the rules. No, it doesn't work that way. I got to put on long frickin' socks to lift.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Right. Again, to comply with that reductionist rule set.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, all right, let's do this. Let's go to break.
all right. We'll be back in a minute, everybody. Hey listeners, this is Dr. Lonnie Lowry. If you've ever had anyone critique you on your protein intake as part of your weightlifting lifestyle, oh, you poor meathead, all that extra protein is going to rot your kidneys or weaken your bones or dehydrate you or give you gout or who knows what. There is a book available. You could simply Google CRC Press and Lowry. And what I've done is reach out to experts all over the world and create a book, a single compendium that you can hold up and say, this is why I consume extra protein. This can be very valuable when you're being quote-unquote educated by various professionals on the topic. There's an enormous amount of literature in this book on the safety, the effectiveness, how protein works in cells, the history of protein and weight trainers, much more. So again, please check out CRC Press and Protein and Lowry. You can just Google that, and I do, full disclosure, I do make a small single-digit royalty on the book, but that's not why I did it. I did it so we can all have something, our particular population, to both defend what we do and to inform our nutrition and our eating. Thanks. Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. Toward this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go.
Like your weekly fix of Iron Radio? In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more, that's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
And we're back. This is Dr. Mike T. Nelson here with Dr. Lonnie Lowry, Coach Phil Stevens. And for this segment, we're talking about what we have eaten this past week and what supplements we have used. Do you want to kick it off, Lonnie, with what you've been doing lately?
I could, and I hope that listeners, again, this is sort of a stimulus to think about what you've been doing and why,
Yeah.
Well, let's see. One thing that jumps out is on Thursday, I didn't eat. I filled up a big container of of dairy proteins, and I just sipped on it throughout the day. So I can't say I didn't eat at all. But I kind of did one of those days where I realized I needed to lean down a little bit, because not like I wasn't up there like Phil, but I was carrying extra fat. I'm just like, I just feel like I need to do something a little dramatic. Who was it, Phil, the in powerlifting that said the blast or dust mentality? Was that Jim?
That's Dave. That's Dave.
Oh, yep. Dave, yeah.
Dave. Yep.
And it's kind of like that, this is, for me, it wasn't the time for some small little tweak. It was the blast approach, which is nothing. Almost nothing, so instead of drinking coffee while I was teaching classes all morning, I did a little bit of that, but it was, just the dilute protein drink, and again, just sort of dramatic way to deal with that. And then the next day I just went back to sort of, normal eating patterns kind of thing. But that's one of the things that I did this past week as far as foods go. If we keep supplements till the next question, I think that's probably the most dramatic thing that I did, at least. I don't know. What about you, Phil? Like, you're out from under the calorie burden.
I am. As of, this is 2 weeks, a full 2 weeks out of it. So basically, after the meet, I was eating, I don't know how much. It was a lot. We didn't count this time. We've counted before, and I was up over 10,000 calories a day.
Oh, my God.
But I didn't calculate it this time. So basically, I was having meals and then meals in between meals.
Meals with meals.
Yeah, basically, I have one meal a day when I'm in meat mode. It just doesn't. It starts when I wake up and ends when I go to sleep.
An 8-hour meal.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, I get a break from that, and it's awesome. And I do this almost after every meet. So basically, I go automatically to a very low carbohydrate diet because I've been shoveling just a lot of not good food in.
Yeah.
So I have my usual 3 good meals, and then I just grab whatever I can at the gas station or whatever on the way to the gym. So lots of like microwave burritos and pot pies, this and that and this and that. So basically, I just give myself a reset after every meet, and for a month, I'll just go on a very low carbohydrate diet. And then after that month, transition back into more regular eating. So add some rice and vegetables, this and that, starches. And so right now I'm 2 weeks into the low carb thing. And like I was telling you guys early in the show in the introductions, like my heaviest right before the meet was 293, and I weighed in at 263 today. So I lifted at the meet. At the meet, I was 287. So that's still a significant decrease in body weight.
Oh, yeah.
And much is just bloated. You know, I was probably carrying around 10 pounds of poop. But
the time for the meat cleanse?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure I can tell you this. If I tried to go squat 700 pounds, I'd probably be in a lot of trouble right now. People don't understand that, how just I can take an athlete and make them eat more for a week, like a significant amount more, and let's go for a squat PR, and it's going to go up. You know, if they significantly add body weight.
Interesting.
But, it's just tissue around the joints and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm eating lots of meat and fats and nuts and things like that. So,
you know, Phil, I'm curious behaviorally. You know how people often say low-carb diets are really a challenge to get used to and everything. I bet for you, it's almost a breath of fresh air.
Oh, it's wonderful. I get so tired. It's like I don't want to look at a donut for a while.
Yeah.
And things like that. And it's like, it was my birthday yesterday. The wife's like, "You want cake?" "Nope, I'm good. I'm good." You know, I had enough. The last 4 months, that's all I had was whatever I wanted. So it got to the point where I didn't want any of it. So because I had so much.
You know, Phil, there's a joke in my family. We used to watch, I don't know if you guys, this is really nerdy, but when my son was young, we'd watch Jimmy Neutron, the little boy scientist, right? So there's an episode where they could rewind the clock, and so they kept reliving his birthday so they could eat birthday cake. And then toward the end of the episode, they look at his mom and they say, "Mrs. Neutron, can we just have some carrot sticks?" So that's like what you're saying, you know?
It is. And I mean, I get to the point where I'm just done. I don't want to eat. And that's where I was at. So it's nice to, I don't have to think. I walk in the kitchen and I grab something that used to walk. You know,
right.
I eat it. Yeah. So,
Mike, what about you? I mean, did travel affect it, or what jumps out in your mind about something you ate?
Yeah, so pretty different. I was down in Baja, La Ventana, Mexico last week, and went down there on a kiteboarding trip, and we had good wind for 2.5 days, and the wind just literally kind of shut off, so that was kind of a bummer. But if I go out and ride, the running joke kiteboarding is that I'll go out and ride, and then people will go in and go out and come in and go out, and I'm usually still out there. So I'll go ride for 2.5, 3 hours at a time sometimes. And then when I come in, if my little reward was, if it was a good session, I'll have 2 Pop-Tarts. Because I usually bring them with, because they're pretty bulletproof. Nothing bad's going to happen to them. The frosting doesn't even melt. You can leave them sit out in the sun and nothing happens to them. So just a very easy, high-caloric travel food per se. And then the resort we were at, they had breakfast and lunch. So breakfast was just, eggs or huevos rancheros or whatever they had. And then lunch was usually some type of fish that they caught, a little bit of rice and a salad. So I purposely had probably lower amounts of calories than what I would normally have. And then in the evening was, we may eat there, we may go out. We went out to one place, and God, we must have ate food for like 2 hours. 2 hours there. So eating at night was sometimes a little bit more. And then normally I would fast from, overnight till I wouldn't eat breakfast till a little bit later the next morning. So I would get up and do some meditation, and they didn't really have workout equipment down there. So I just started doing more cardiovascular. So I, go for a run each morning and walk around. And then I would have some coffee, and then I would have breakfast later. So I probably have about a 12-hour fast overnight. So it's a little bit different than the norm, but I tried to set it up this time instead of being hyper worried about everything. Just, I got enough protein. The calories are probably a little bit lower, which was done on purpose. And I came back and I weighed the exact same weight as when I left, and I was gone for 8 days. So I was happy with that.
Homeostasis, baby.
Yeah.
One food that I ate, this might be informative for listeners, is normally I get this like pre-cooked mesquite chicken breast stuff, and I'll eat it at lunch, and it's easy actually to eat a quote-unquote clean diet. I don't know what a loaded word that is, but I'm a captive audience. If I take stuff like, colored bell pepper, like the mini little colored peppers and carrots and a chicken breast for lunch to work, that's all I've got. So that's what I eat. So it's actually easy to comply. But one other thing I did this week that might be interesting is I switched out chicken for fake crab meat. I don't know if you've seen this stuff. You can even get it at discount grocers now. And you know what really stuns me about that shit is it's carbohydrate. There's more carbohydrate than there is protein in it. I mean, I'm like, this is like Phil says, this is something it was supposed to have been walking at some point. It shouldn't be carbohydrate. This should be protein, and there is some protein in it. And I knew what I was getting into actually after I had bought it, looked at the package and everything. So I swigged down some of this it's almost a protein water. It's just a real low dose protein kind of shake. It's not milky. It's more juicy kind of thing. As the beverage with it. But yeah, that fake crab, it's not a 1-for-1 equivalent. You actually have to boost the protein content of the meal because it seems like meat, but it's not. So, all right, let's talk about supplements just as we start to wind down, or even purposeful anything that you went after for a reason. Phil, can you think of anything supplemental or otherwise
that I'm taking right now?
Yeah, that you did this past week.
Yeah, I take vitamin D twice a day, and vitamin C, and before I train, I guess you could call it a supplement, Advil. So that's about it.
A staple.
But it's winter. So we try and take vitamin D in the winter and things like that, just in case.
Yeah. There's enough data on vitamin D. Whether it's through, I know a lot of this depends on initial levels and whatnot, but whether it's, some of these vague links that keep cropping up with testosterone production or just muscle strength in general, there's some interesting research. I think vitamin D, I guess my point is the metabolic effects reach beyond just bone health, when people think vitamin D being a bone vitamin and whatnot. That's one of the ones I actually do, too. I've been taking 4,000. I kind of go back and forth, 2,000 or 4,000 IUs of vitamin D this time of year, just sort of randomly. It's funny. I also do the vitamin C. Since I blew out my left knee running, of all things, a couple of years ago, I'm really trying to prolong the life of that joint. I'll take a 250 milligram vitamin C. I like the lower dose stuff with some glucosamine, chondroitin, and then I actually drink it down with bone broth, to try to just get some collagen in my body. And then when I'm running around all morning, I'm just kind of hoping that something in there embeds in my damaged, meniscus in my left knee, I guess. Plus everywhere else. I mean, that's just one that jumps out. Pretty much all up and down my spine, and almost every joint in my body. I'm hoping for some incorporation of that. But that's one of the supplements that I've been doing, sort of a combination of a C with the glucosamine, chondroitin, and the bone broth is just sort of a cheap-ass collagen replacement thing.
Yeah.
How about you, Miguel?
A couple things are a little bit different is normally most mornings if I'm doing work stuff, I'll take a nootropic. So I've been using right now Qualia Mind, which is pretty expensive, but I think in terms of nootropics, there's not a ton of data, but I really like that one. And then a tip I got from Tom Inclinon is taking it, and then I'll go do my meditation stuff and then I'll do some type of cardiovascular exercise about 30 to 60 minutes after. And his theory, which I haven't seen any direct data on, but kind of makes sense, is that you're increasing blood flow with cardiovascular exercise to the brain, which we know that happens, especially hippocampal area, and that maybe you get a better delivery of nootropics because of the increased blood flow at that same time.
Delivery, yeah.
So, yeah. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. I was going to, try and do more cardiovascular stuff in the morning anyway. Yeah, so I seem to like that. It seems to help a little bit, which could be placebo. But so at home, I'll do that and then get on the rower. When I was in Mexico, I just did a run in the morning, and then I was in Boulder a couple of weeks ago. I did take a lot more fish oil and vitamin D at that point. I just picked some up at the store there, and then in Mexico, I usually don't bring much fish oil with because it's just kind of hard to travel with per se. You can get the capsules, but and half-life is super long, so I don't worry too much about that. The only other thing different is I did add something called astaxanthin, which is the red carotenoid that's found like in it wouldn't be in your artificial seafood, but in real seafood, that's the red kind of color. They make it from a red algae plant in Hawaii. And there's some data showing that it may help protect skin from ultraviolet. And I tend to be a very white northern descent person, so I tend to burn pretty easy in sun. So I usually will start taking that before I go anywhere in a sunnier climate, especially off-season, especially when it's winter in Minnesota. So I took that when I was down there, and then when I travel, I'll take a few more medicinal mushrooms. So this time I was just taking reishi and turkey tail. So I'll take that at night with a little bit more magnesium.
Interesting.
That's the only differences. And there's some pretty good data on reishi in terms of immune function. It's not something you really feel per se, but in terms of travel and exposure to other areas, and especially getting on flying germ tubes and that kind of stuff.
Totally.
It seems to help.
That's interesting that you said that. I swapped out one of my triple strength fish oils for a krill with astaxanthin. Just because again, there's enough interesting stuff about that pigment, not to mention the slight differences. One thing you got to be careful, I think, with the krill oil, though, is even though they say, it's phospholipid derived and it's more absorbable and this and that, okay, but God, the dose is low in those little pills.
Very low.
Very low, like 100 milligrams of total omega-3s or 150, and I'm like, whoa. Now, so that's why I replaced only one of my usual, large fish oil capsules, gel caps, with one of those. But I thought, you get a little bit of the additional, call it antioxidant support or whatever you want, in a little bit different type. I think variety is a good rule of thumb with food and supplements and stuff. So it's interesting that you're doing that. Although you're taking that specifically, right, by itself, not as part of a krill or anything else.
Yeah, I take it specifically just because in krill oil, the amount of astaxanthin is like really, really
low.
Small.
Yeah.
So I'll tend to take a higher dose of usually around 10 milligrams daily for a week before and then the week of. And I don't know. I mean, it seems to help, but maybe it's just because I've been out in the sun a little bit more overall the past couple of years too. So, similar to you, I think rotating some of those things through that I don't have a lot of exposure to in my diet every once in a while is probably going to be a good thing.
Yeah.
It's not something I take year-round all the time, though.
Right, yeah. And, it's one of those things that, just as browsing through the literature, apparently you've experienced the same thing. It just doesn't go away. You keep hearing this stuff about, some of the benefits. Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. We're pretty much out of time.
Cool.
There we go.
All right. We'll see everybody next time.
See you next week.
All right. See ya.
Hey, listeners. Have you seen the store at IronRadio.org? There are 3 halls in the store. One for Phil, one for Fortress, and one for myself, Dr. Lowry. And they're thematic. So you can go into our Halls of Iron store and choose based on your goal. If you need something to learn or read or something nutritional, you can look in my store. Lonnie's store. If you want something about injury prevention or competition, then take a look at Phil's Hall of Iron. And if you want something about motivation or daily training, Fortress's Hall has what you're looking for. There are some fun, heroic descriptors as you browse through the stores. We try to make it a little more fun than the average boring online store. And whether you're a novice lifter or someone more experienced, you can take heart that you're not wasting your time. The things that we put in each Hall of Iron are actually based on our own recommendations. Protein powders that we know to be good, knee sleeves, wraps of some kind, things that Fortress uses in his own training. The stuff you see, you know is good. This way you don't waste time. So check out the Iron Radio store at ironradio.org and let us know what you think on the forums, and certainly you can request products and we will screen them before they go in. So thanks for listening. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.